guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and I'm here with the weekly tea break. This is my new series of videos in which every week I wrap up everything I read and received in the previous week. And I've got my sloth mug, so we're ready to start. So Christmas is quickly approaching. We've got Thanksgiving coming up this week, and I was not prepared in any way, shape, or form to face the fact that November is almost over. This month has completely flown by. So I have been doing a lot of Christmas knitting, and I actually have managed to finish a couple of books, which is impressive given how many socks I'm making right now. So I read 2 books this week and I DNF'd 1 more, so let's go ahead and talk about those first. First off, the book that I DNF'd is the Premonitions Bureau by someone whose name I can't remember. The cover will be on the screen though. And it's a nonfiction book, and you would think it would be awesome. Basically, after the Aberfan coal mining disaster in Wales, a bunch of people came forward saying that they had like dreams predicting the event, including a little girl who actually died in the tragedy. And so someone just set up something called the Premonitions Bureau to try to figure out if we could predict disasters before they happen. So it's a very real thing. It's a great topic for a nonfiction book, but this book was a total mess. I don't know how you can take a subject that good and just have a completely and totally boring book, but I ended up DNFing it because life is too short. I actually bought this for my mum, I think for Christmas last year, maybe for her birthday, and she read it and she said it was okay, but I was like absolutely convinced I would love it, and like, no. So at least that's one off the TBR, so that's quite nice. In terms of books that I did actually finish, I read 2 books this week. The first one being Minor Hauntings, edited by Jen Baker. I talked about this in the last tea break. I was in the middle of it. I was struggling to focus. I think I had like 4 stories left at that point. I was struggling to focus because apparently my brain wanted like one long linear storyline, and this wasn't quite giving that, but I did finish this finally. I would probably give it like a solid 3.5 stars. As any short story collection goes, some of them are going to be really good, some of them are going to be a little bit dull, and there were some really awesome stories in here. I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for like, you know, old-timey ghost stories, and if you're looking for kind of ghost stories in general, I would recommend this, but not all of them were hits. Some of them were really good. There's one by Elizabeth Gaskell, which is up close, like at the very beginning. I think it actually is, it's the second story, it's not the first story, but that was really good. There's one at the end called like The Little Red Shoes, I think, which is quite good as well. Very macabre. There's lots of kind of examples of, you know, various kinds of ghost stories. The editor puts in like an introduction to each one before each story, which was interesting to read, but yeah, it was good, it was fine. Then I read Black Paradox by Junji Ito. This is one of the 2 Junji Ito books that I picked up while I was in the States because I saw a couple that I didn't have in my collection. I read Dissolving Classroom last week and I read Black Paradox this week. I enjoyed this one much more. This is a really fantastic, totally bizarre story. It's very suicide heavy, so like, just a heads up if that's something that you don't particularly want to read about. But basically it's about these 4 strangers who meet on a suicide forum and they plan to die together, and things go horribly weird and wrong, as can only happen in a Junji Ito book. I really enjoyed this. This is on kind of like the top end of like his books for me. I really thought that this was fantastic. It's totally bizarre, it's totally weird, but I really enjoyed it. This is like a solid 4-star for me. So now moving on to books that I'm currently reading. I'm in the middle of 4 books. Oh my god, I'm in the middle of 4 books right now. I swore that I wouldn't let myself get to this place again, but it's happening again. So first things first, I am reading Lost in the Moment and Found by Shauna Maguire. This is the 8th book in the Wayward Children's series of novellas, and this is like the first one that, ever since Every Heart a Doorway, the very first one, this is the first one that feels really, truly standalone. As far as I can remember, and as far as I can tell at this point, I'm about 60% in. I'm going to finish it up tonight. There's no real connection to like the characters or the school that we see in the past books. So this is well and truly a standalone book. If it's something that you are interested in picking up, it would be a nice place to start with this series, but it is quite dark. Basically, this novella is about a little girl named Ancy whose father passes away very tragically and her mother remarries, and her new husband is very clearly trying to groom Ancy. So she runs away before anything truly terrible can happen. There's no like sexual abuse in this book so far, but it's definitely like we're getting to that point. It gets very, very uncomfortable. She runs away, her door opens. If you know anything about the books, that means that she's going to enter into this sort of fantasy world beyond our own. It's really, really good so far. The beginning is quite harrowing, because, you know, you have the tragedy of her father passing, she's a big daddy's girl, and then you have sort of like all these small insidious events that her stepfather is setting up that kind of culminate in this one moment in her room. And it was really uncomfortable to read. This one feels, I don't want to make like great statements and conjectures. I would need to look into it a little bit more, but this feels a little bit more personal than some of the other books in terms of like kind of that specific storyline. So I'm going to look into it a little bit more and see what she says about kind of writing it and everything like that, but it's really good so far. I'm really enjoying kind of the world beyond the door and Ancy's sort of adventure so far. It's really fabulous. I'm going to finish it tonight, and this will come out in January if you're interested in picking it up. Because I'm doing so much knitting, I have decided that I'm going to stick with audiobooks. I'm not going to only listen to podcasts, I'm also going to listen to audiobooks. And I've been going with a lot of my shorter audiobooks lately, but I decided that since I am knitting so many pairs of socks, I've dedicated myself to making 5 pairs of socks before Christmas because everyone in my family is getting socks because socks are awesome. So I'm doing a lot of sock knitting right now. So I decided that I was going to dedicate myself to a longer audiobook. So finally, after like more than 10 years, maybe like 13, 15 years or so, I'm finally dedicating myself to reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is a long book. I believe the audiobook is about 32 hours, and the audiobooks that I have been picking lately have been much shorter, so I can kind of churn through them, but I felt the call of the long audiobook, and I think this is going to be perfect. So basically, this is set in an alternate version of Victorian England in which magic was once present in the world and has now vanished, and we follow 2 characters, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I am really enjoying it so far. I'm I'm like an hour in. He's just arrived in London, which is not particularly far into this book whatsoever, but I'm really enjoying the writing style. I'm loving the footnotes. I love a book that has good footnotes, and I think this is going to be really fun, but I think you're going to be hearing about this in my current reads for a while. I am also reading House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. I did not enjoy her debut, which is Year of the Witching. It came out not last year, but maybe the year before. It had a lot of promise. It's that kind of alternate sort of historical setting that feels very realistic but has some kind of fantasy element to it. I didn't love that one, but I loved a lot of her ideas and a lot of her writing, so I decided to give her second book a try. So this is a very, very gothic fantasy, and it is set in a very European feeling city and a very industrial revolution feeling world. And we follow, I believe, Marion, the main character, and she is basically a girl who lives in the slums. She's doing everything she can to get by. Her brother is a drug addict and she's an orphan. Like, life is horrible and she wants more for herself. So one day she decides to respond to an ad in the paper to become a blood maiden. So in the north of this particular country, the nobles were kind of this sort of ancient crumbling class, feed off of young women called blood maidens. Blood maidens are very glamorous. They're very kind of like courtesan-esque, but they feed their blood to the people who they are indentured to. They live this very luxurious life. This is looked down upon in Marion City, as I'm sure you can probably imagine, but she decides to go ahead and do it anyway, and it's good so far. I think I'm on chapter 7, so I'm not very far. I'm like 60 pages in, but it's good so far. I am feeling cautiously optimistic because, again, I really love the worlds that she creates. Historical fantasy doesn't always work for me in a way that I really, really wish it would, because it sounds like it would be my exact kind of thing, but I don't always get on with it. I really liked the world from the Year of the Witching, and I really like this world as well, so I have high hopes. Okay, I've just checked Goodreads. I am only reading 3 books right now, so it's not as bad as 4, but I can imagine myself picking up something else this week, but hopefully I'll finish at least the Sean and Maguire book before I do that. I have been very, very good this week. I haven't bought any new books, and I have really put myself on a requesting ban because I need to get that TBR down. My TBR currently sits at, I believe, 1018 or 1019, which is a lot of books, and I am hoping that through until Christmas time, when my family and I give each other a ton of books, I will be able to kind of get those numbers down a little bit and not pick up anything new. So there are no new books to report this week, which is great news for my wallet. But I do have a couple of options for what I'm going to read next. You will see my US Baltimore book haul coming up in my next video, which will be coming up this week, where I talk about all of these in much more detail, but I have a ton of new stuff that I could potentially choose from. But I think my next book is going to be The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This is basically, it says in the blurb, Mexican Gothic meets Rebecca, which are two books I happen to love. I actually started this in the taxi on the way home from the airport, and it's definitely got, if you wished Mrs. De Winter had a backbone in Rebecca, that's what I'm getting here, which is quite exciting. I'm probably gonna need to start over again because we were so sick coming back from the airport that I just, or after we got home from the airport, that I just haven't picked this up, and I have completely forgotten pretty much everything that's happened so far. But I think that this is going to be my next book. Angela from Literature Science Alliance has talked about this a lot, and I am really excited to go ahead and read this. I think it's going to be fabulous. But I'm also thinking it's the end of the year. Maybe it's time to do a little project for the month of December. So last year I went ahead and pulled together the world's most grim TBR. It was so depressing. It was such a good TBR though. It was basically all of the books in the last books in trilogies that I needed to finish. So I read The Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. I had The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, which I didn't end up reading on that TBR. And it was so bleak, but it was great because I had this project for the end of the year, last month of the year. I could really round out my year. And I think I'm gonna do that again this year. So my list of potential next reads is going to be quite long, I think, but I do have some ideas. I'm thinking I might either just pick books that I picked up in my most recent book haul in Baltimore, which you will see is a truly exquisite stack of books. That is a fantastic book haul. So there's tons of good options there. I think that I might potentially choose some series to finish like I did last year. That's a good option as well. But I was also thinking that I would maybe read some of those highly anticipated books that I haven't picked up yet, like The Final Strife or Babel, that I was so desperate to get my hands on and then just didn't end up reading. I might do that in December and then do some book diaries or something. Let me know what you think. Anyway, that's the end of this tea break. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the books that I have read recently and I think I'm going to be cracking on with here in the future. I would love to hear in the comments below if you're stressed about Christmas like I am, if you're doing a lot of frantic crafting projects like I am, or if you just have any particular books that you want to shout out, either things that you've read recently or anything that you've recently picked up. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.